The waitress walked out of the swinging door from the kitchen, a pot of coffee in her hand. She smacked her gum and walked over to the counter. She was facing right at the TV in my dorky school picture. I held my breath. She walked around behind the counter and set the coffee down, then started counting money from her apron pocket. The TV was right above her head. I was frozen, hardly breathing, with my mouth stuck open and my stomach flopping like a fish in the bottom of a boat. She looked up from her money and saw me. I couldn't help it. My eyes flickered up to my picture behind her. She stopped chewing her gum and turned her head to look. My stomach caved in. Just as her head made it almost all the way around, the picture changed back to the map. It still said missing child alert on the screen, but my face was finally gone. I stared, breathless, at the back of the waitress's head. Had the picture changed before she had seen it? My fist strangled the empty fork in my hand. The waitress turned back to me and cocked an eyebrow. She put her money away and walked over to me, her gum smacking in her mouth. She put one hand on her hip and looked down at me. "Missing kid, huh?" She leaned down a bit and lowered her voice. "Tell the truth, honey. Did that scare you?" I looked up at her, mouth still open, unable to speak. All my plans were going to go up in smoke the first night over a plate of runny eggs. "Well," she went on, "don't let it. There's more good folks than bad in the world, believe it or not. I bet they find him." She winked at me, and I tried desperately to smile. She hadn't seen. "I know it's tough," she added with a roll of her eyes out the window toward the neon bar sign. "Having a daddy who ain't really looking out for you." She reached down and patted my head. "He don't know what he's missing out on, sweetie, and you're gonna be just fine. My dad was a bum, and I turned out all right." She turned and walked away, and I finally started to breathe again. She didn't suspect a thing. I shook my head and took a shaky breath. People can be so blind. That's the truth. The phone number was still on the TV below the map. I grabbed my pen and wrote it on a napkin and shoved it in my pocket. I noticed the map had changed. Now, after the word Spokane, there was a question mark. 3 more dots appeared on the red wiggly line between Wenatchee and Spokane. They were labeled Quincy, Moses Lake, and Ritzville. Of course, the bus had shown up in Spokane by now, and I wasn't on it, so they figured I must have gotten off at one of the stops in between. They were still off my trail. As I closed my notebook, the nausea hit me, a green, rolling wave of sickness that started deep in my belly and rose up toward my throat. I grabbed the edge of the table with both hands, trying to ride it out. It was no use. I knew the feeling too well. My mouth went dry, then filled up with spit, then went sour. I jumped up and ran for the bathroom. I saw the waitress watch me from across the restaurant. I barely made it. I planted my knees in front of the toilet just as my eggs and toast came back up. I tried to be quiet, but there's only so much you can do. My stomach heaved and I'd lost all the food I had managed to choke down. My eyes watered and my hands shook. The floor was filthy. The toilet was already disgusting before I got there, and it wasn't getting any prettier. Between heaves, I spit and tried to breathe through my mouth and read all the dirty words scratched on the chipped metal walls of the bathroom stall. I thought of Hungry Willie at the bar and me puking up dinner. Life stinks. That's the truth. Here's what I don't get. Why does everyone always try to pretend it doesn't? I rinsed my mouth in the sink and hurried back to my table. Bo, thank goodness, was still in the duffel. I'd been afraid he'd try to come and find me. I scratched him quick behind his ears and was zipping the duffel bag closed when the waitress came up behind me. "You okay, honey? Do you want some 7-Up or something?" Her voice was all sweet and worried, like a mom's. It only made me madder. "No," I said without looking at her. "I just need to pay." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wad of cash. "Are you sure? I could get you some more toast, or go get your dad, or—" "I'm fine," I snapped, and this time I looked at her. I could feel the anger in my eyebrows. Her eyes widened in surprise. "My dad gave me money for the food. Just give me the bill so I can go." "You know what, honey? Don't worry about it. Keep the money and don't tell your dad. Maybe it'll be helpful later." "I don't need your help. I'm fine. I just need to pay and go. Tell me how much." My voice sounded angrier than I wanted, but my stomach was still gurgling and my legs were weak, and the smell of coffee and bacon was making me feel worse, and Bo was still stuck in the duffel. I wanted to get outside into the darkness so I could hug my dog and smell nothing except his fur. I wanted to get away from the TV. The waitress snapped her gum a few times, then nodded. "It's $8. I pulled a 10 and a 20 out of my handful of bills and dropped them on the table. "That's enough for mine," I said, "and for whatever Willie wants." The world was starting to spin again, and the taste of throw-up in my mouth wasn't making me feel any better. I shoved my notebook and pen into my backpack, grabbed Bo's duffel, and brushed past the waitress toward the door. I swallowed and breathed tight little breaths to keep from puking again. The waitress followed me to the door. "You're an angry kid," she said to my back as I pushed the door open, "but maybe you got reasons." "Maybe I do," I answered, and the door closed behind me. Outside in the darkness, the cool air cleared my head. My stomach started to settle down, but I was still mad. Mad at the TV, mad at my stomach, mad at the waitress. I wasn't even sure why. I walked out to the edge of the parking lot to the end where the light from the windows reached. I counted my stack of hard-saved money one more time, then slipped it back into my pocket. I turned around and looked at the restaurant. Dribbles of rain sprinkled down onto my neck. Somewhere, not too far away in the darkness, a car alarm started screaming. The restaurant looked warm and cheerful, its yellow light spilling out like a runny egg yolk into the darkness. It looked safe, a place to come in from the cold. I could see the waitress clearing the dishes from my table, talking over her shoulder to the old couple. It was a place with sound and people, a place where life just kept going on. I hated it. I was standing outside weak and tasting like vomit, alone again. I lifted the camera from around my neck, framed the lighted windows of the restaurant right in the middle with the night's blackness all around, and snapped a picture. I didn't see the gang of guys watching me from the shadows. When I turned and walked away through the litter and broken glass of the empty, middle of the night street, they were following close behind.